Shavua Tov, everybody. Rabbi Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School. You find us online at www.koshertorah.com. Well, tonight's a little class here, live on Facebook, soon to be recorded for YouTube. I want to share with you some actual, what I consider to be basic points, which usually tend to be really misunderstood today and become a source for a lot of confusion about what is Kabbalah and what is Jewish mysticism. So tonight we're going to have a wee bit of a history lesson, some of my more, of course, never to be humble opinions on certain topics, which I'm sure you're all going to love and hate, and try to set the record straight on what really is and isn't what we call Kabbalah. Okay? Kabbalah is a term that, well, let me give you a little bit of personal history. Back in the day when I first wanted to study Kabbalah, we're talking like the 1970s. How many of you were even around in those days? Okay? There weren't any books available. This was before even Aryeh Kaplan's works were published. Many of you might be familiar with Rabbi Kaplan. He wrote the books Meditation in the Bible, Meditation on Kabbalah. Great foundational works, which, if I could say ever so humbly, my works have picked up and augmented since his passing. This is even before his works. The only things that were available in my day were like translations of Gershom Shalom's works published by Schocken Press and things like that, all the academic stuff. Essentially, in my day, English books on Kabbalah, with maybe the exception of the Simon version of the English translation of the Zohar published by Sonsino, nothing existed. There wasn't anything out there. Today, how many, 30, 40 years later now, everything is so radically changed. In my day, you'd walk into a place, great learning like Yeshiva University, say, I want to study Kabbalah. And they'd look at you like you were a dinosaur or a heretic. Today, everybody studies Kabbalah, everybody talks about Kabbalah. It has become part and parcel of pretty much mainstream Judaism. And I'm not sure that's a blessing or a curse, and I'll share with you some of my ideas about that later on. But first, we got to set the record straight here, because that which we today call Jewish mysticism has a very long history. And unlike the Midrashic teachings of it, Midrash, remember, is stories, embellishments, fables, legends. In other words, not history. So we have books today which are claimed to be as ancient as Adam himself. That's a legend. It's a story. There's no historical validity to it whatsoever. We have books that are claimed to be from Enoch. They weren't written by Enoch. They have no connection to the historical Enoch. Not only do we have no historical evidence to connect them to the historical Enoch, we have a pretty good amount of evidence to connect them to a period much later in history, ballpark to about the time period of the Maccabees. That's when the books of Enoch came about. And we can go through pretty much the majority of literature of those books that are claimed to be so ancient. The famous book of Ari'zal HaMalach, and I think I'm one of the few people in the world who actually not only have read the book and learned the book, but I actually teach from Ari'zal, go into my courses. And of course, on our website, on our front page, and you'll see things that I've taught about the Shemot Kodashim. I have full lessons from Ari'zal. I don't know anybody else who does things like this. I do this to try to document and teach authentic material so that people can have access to it without having to go through second and third parties as what it says and what it doesn't say. You see for yourself what it says. But now we're taking a little walk through history. What does this word Kabbalah actually mean? Well, the word, as we know, means reception. Now, you could say it is the reception of the traditions received by the ancients. Oh, that's very true. We know right from the beginning of Pirkei Avot, Moshe received the Torah from Sinai and passed it on to Yehoshua. So I guess the first Kabbalist per se was Moses. But the Torah that Moses received on Mount Sinai was not the Zohar or the writings of the Ariel or anything of the kind. It's 5 books of Moses like we all have and read every day called the Chumash. But now, the original understanding of this word Kabbalah, reception, was applied by our Talmudic sages to very simply the teachings of the prophets. Remember good old Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and the like? Their teachings were the original reception. Their teachings are the original Kabbalah. So every time that you're reading a haftarah in the synagogue on a Shabbat, that's Kabbalah study in the most historical, authentic form. But you're going to say to me, well, that's not mysticism, Rabbi. Kabbalah is mysticism. Well, yes, it is, to a point. Now let's discuss that point. The original teachings of the prophets. When you wanted to become a biblical prophet, how do you think that happened? You think this was some sketch by the now disgraced comedian Bill Cosby, like Noah and the Lord, where there was like a spiritual doorbell, ding dong, and you hear God's voice, Noah, this is the Lord. Yeah, right. No, it wasn't like that at all. The Bible makes it very clear. Prophets went to a prophet's school. They had to learn how to become a Nabi. And we have examples in the prophets themselves, the historical writings, that this included music, this included dance, very similar to, and most likely this is maybe one of the last remnants of this original biblical traditions, that which we today see amongst the Sufi. The Sufi connection to the ancient Kabbalistic connection, very old. It's been well documented. You see Rabbi Abraham ben Rambam in his book Maspik Lovdei Hashem. He's making references to the Sufi. You hear Chaim Vital having connections with Sufi sheikhs. There have been through the centuries in the Sufi orders, Jewish individuals, Kabbalists and Sufi masters have always been attached to, connected to one another like brothers. In my opinion, it is one of the most terrible crimes of spirituality that the modern hostility between Judaism and Islam, Jews and Arabs, the byproduct of which is the breakdown of the connection between many of the ancient Sufi masters, I should say the master schools, and the Sephardi Kabbalist schools. Because one who studies the two systems clearly sees a connection to there that has been there for centuries. Biblically speaking, again, the biblical prophets learned to go into trance. They learned very similar traditions to what today is called shamanism. Not that the biblical prophets sought out nature spirits. We do not seek them out. We do not go in that path like this. Ours is ascent up. But the psychological process of transcending the physical world and going off into parallel or higher realities of consciousness is similar. We see this clearly within the context of the biblical experience. Very few prophets ever actually documented the prophetic experience. They document the prophetic message. But only ones like Ezekiel and the like document the prophetic experience. Now, just a quick note about Ezekiel's chariot. In my classes for our private students, our KosherTorah student body, I just am now finishing a series for this summer, 2018, on the topic of Aliyah, or the Ascent School of Kabbalah, with emphasis on the development of parapsychological powers and abilities, because that's really what the whole prophetic school is all about. That's really what Torah is all about. That's what authentic Kabbalah is always about. Expanding the powers of the mind and consciousness to influence the world. I'll give a couple examples of that in a minute. But getting back to the point here, the biblical prophets, like Ezekiel, he saw this great grandiose chariot. And in all due respect to my peer from Ancient Aliens, Eric Von Daniken, and all my buddies there on the TV show, Ezekiel's chariot was not a spaceship, had nothing to do with these make-believe Anunnaki, which do not exist. Sorry to Zechariah Sitchin, he didn't get it right. We don't hold by Anunnaki. We're not worried about Nibiru or any of this other kind of stuff. Is there a mysterious planet X out there? Most likely, but it's not what they say that it is. Now, you can believe whatever you want. You know, I'm just telling you from our Torah point of view, what our experience is. For those of us who actually like make Aliyot and ascent and go places, you go look at the places that aren't there. Kind of get frustrated, you know. That's not there. What can I say? But anyway, aside from all of that talk, all right. What Ezekiel saw in the chariot and the man who sat on the throne of the chariot, that wasn't God either. Rambam makes that very clear. It is taught that very clear in all of our traditions. When Rambam talks about it, he shuts up. I talk about this. I teach about this. I teach about the race of those higher entities who we call the Metatron. Yeah, Metatron's not a single guy. It's a race of beings. All right? You can go onto my YouTube channel. I have one of my classes that I originally did for a student body called Secrets of the Metatron Race. I thought it was so important I put it up there for the public. You know, I'm going to digress for just a minute here to share something with you. You know, our school, like every other religious organization, gets by with the financial support of you, our student body. We've always struggled. We've been around for 25 years, and like every other organization, you know, we're not millionaires, and it's always hard to make a living and the like. And I've always wanted to literally make all of our material for free and rely upon the good graces and donations of the public. Oh, I wish that that could be the case. And I share with you this, the public. You make it so for me, I'll promise I'll make it so for you. That's all I can ever say. In the meantime, until that's so, I got to run a business, all right? Got to get the bills paid, so please understand that. That's part of, I guess, the prophetic traditions of being realistic. But getting back to the point now, the biblical prophetic tradition was an expansion of consciousness, which put one in contact with higher realms of reality, which also gave one, if you will, powers and abilities far above those of mortal men. I did a series on Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, from the Tanakh, from the Bible. Very famous story when Elijah prayed for rain. Those of you go look this up in the book of Kings. All right? Elijah goes, puts his head down in the prophetic tradition, position. The prophetic position is something that's even referred to later in the Lurianic tradition in a different way called Talat, Kalilan, Betlat, where three in which three. In other words, you're going into an embryonic pose. I can't do it on camera here for you. Most people get it all wrong. It requires, it's a form where you're stretching out the back in such a way, curled in a ball. In the Oriental tradition, they say it expresses what they call the Kundalini. We call it the life force energy, right? The Nefesh, the Ruach. And it opens up consciousness, body energy, and literally you become a conduit of energy. You become the Merkava. Well, this is what Eliyahu was doing, all right? And what he did was he went and it says he prayed for rain. Then he goes and asks his servant, any rain yet? He looks off to the horizon. Nope, nothing yet. Eliyahu goes back, prays again. What is all this? Pray. What are you going asking God, dear God, please send rain? How many times do you have to say please before God says, oh, all right, I'll send the rain? Is that what you think prayer is? How do you pray more intently? Comes out of prayer again. Says to his servant, any rain yet? Says, I see a cloud on the horizon. Goes back here the third time. Boom. Superpower rain. What did Eliyahu do? He didn't ask God for the rain. God didn't send the rain. Eliyahu created the rain. Eliyahu made the mental construct of the rain and then materialized it into actual physical being. Many of you might be familiar with this concept because it's the underlying concept that we find later in the Gemara, very famous teaching which says Rabba Bara Gavra. where the great sage Rabbah created a man, otherwise known to us as a golem. This is the power of the mind over matter. This power was the original responsibility and authority of the biblical prophets. This is the prophetic Kabbalah that was passed down through the ages. When our sages taught us that prophecy ceased with the final prophets, Malachi and the like, what it meant wasn't that people did not continue to go ascending and losing any contact. No, none of that was lost. What was lost was simply one thing: the message. God no longer chose individuals to present public messages of moral edification. That's all that stopped. Why? Because all the messages were already given. There's nothing more that needs to be said. Anytime we need a message of moral edification today, you want to know what the heck is wrong with this world today? You want to know what's wrong with our society today? You can go up and read any page in the Bible. You can read the words of Isaiah from 2,500 years ago, the words from Abraham 4,000 years ago. Anything and everything that you want to know, already written down. Nothing more needs to be said. We're just being repetitive. That's all what it means that prophecy ceased. But we call Ruach HaKodesh that never ceased. Ascent never ceased. Connections never ceased. It can't. It can never cease. Matter of fact, it's a biblical commandment to bond with God. It's called Devikut, and it's counted as one of the 613 commandments. What do you think? God canceled one of the commandments? No, that didn't happen. So now, what happened to the ascent school? Well, during the times of the Second Temple, many of the ascent school were in major conflict with the growing philosophical school that was coming into vogue due to the influence of Greek philosophy, which was permeating the entire known world in those days. The expansion, whether it was the Ptolemaic Empire, the Seleucid Empire. Forget about just what was happening with the Greeks in the Hanukkah story. This is part and parcel of the global influence of the time. Well, the old school, they kind of like went down to the hills and hung out there. They became in contact with many of the older traditions that came out of places even like Greece. Remember, like Pythagoras? Remember good old Pythagoras? Remember from high school algebra? Remember the Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus b squared equals c squared? Well, this guy Pythagoras was a very profound deep mystic, and he had a mysticism of numbers. No, mysticism of numbers. You ever hear of that in a Jewish tradition? We call it gematria. Yeah, same thing, same root as the word geometry. Well, good old Pythagoras is documented in Greek historical sources of having traveled to the Middle East and met with what we today call the descendants of the biblical prophets. So he had connections in the olden days. In those days, all the old schools connected with one another. And they all had experience. That was the key. Now, other schools arose, magic schools, mystic schools. They came out of Greece, they came out of Rome, they came out of Egypt, they came out of Babylon, they came out of Persia. And everything overlaps and intermersed with everything else. When we study Talmud, we see a lot of that influence, right? Remember, the Talmud that we study today is mostly what we call the Babylonian Talmud, Talmud Bavli. And they lived in a very superstitious world in the old Chaldean Babylonian Empire. And they became aware of a lot of stuff going on, which is very well documented and recorded in our Gemara. So, for example, today, amongst our ancient alien buddies, you read in alien literature all about like the alien abductions, like those little gray guys with the big eyes and all the rest of that stuff. No, they're not demons. They're not like the minions of Satan. And there's something totally different. We call them by a tradition, a name that we know that's been passed down to us. We know them as the Nishaya. And we know where they come from. And I talk about this in my book, aliens, angels, and demons. I'm not going to get into all the details right now. I'm just throwing this in as a give you an example. Well, amongst our Talmudic rabbis, they very well knew the continuity of the ascent school. We have a great record of it right in the tractate Hagigah about the famous four who ascended into the Pardes. You see, ascent was never lost. Now, there are rules for ascent. I've written about this. And the Gemara gives the example of Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, and the like, to warn us of different things that, if you will, stumbling blocks along the way, warnings along the path about what it requires and what it takes to walk the prophetic path. They call that prophetic path by a name. Being that walking the prophetic path and becoming the receptacle of the Spirit makes you the vessel, the vehicle through which God moves in this world. What is a vessel that moves called in biblical speak? A Merkava. So the work of the Merkava, or Ma'aseh Merkava, means what you have to do, following the biblical traditions, to make yourself a conduit and a vessel through which Ruach HaKodesh flows through you. Who are you? Well, remember good old Eliyahu HaNavi? We have a midrash, legendary teaching, but it's putting the name of Eliyahu HaNavi, so that's pretty important. From Tana de Eliyahu, the book called Aliyah Rabbah, the 9th chapter, it is stated in Eliyahu's name, right? It calls heaven and earth to witness the powers of the reality of above and below. Bear witness. Doesn't matter if one's Jewish or not Jewish. Doesn't matter if one's man or woman, free or slave, whether that be a political, social, or psychological state. Everyone can receive Ruach HaKodesh. Everyone can achieve this psychic level of development according to what one does. Maimonides, the great philosopher, in his More Nebuchim, second section, chapter 32, if I'm not mistaken, speaks about the levels of expanding consciousness, that this we call psychic development. He calls it, the perfection of the powers of the mind. He says it's a natural evolutionary development of all people. And that's what makes this universal. But our sages taught with regards to this, that this type of teaching can only be taught one-on-one between teacher to student. And that only with a student who has the ability to understand on their own. Now, there are other schools called the Ma'aseh Bereshit schools, which is the study of the laws of nature and science. There's the Sitra Ariel school, which is the balance and harmony of the lower worlds. I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm going to focus on the Ma'aseh Merkava, because that's what we teach here at our KosherTorah school. Connection, communion, that's what it's all about. This is the difference between what I teach at our school and all my other peers. But again, let's continue our little history lesson here. So this Ma'aseh Merkava school, you'll see that there are those who ascended and always wrote literature. And the literature is highly symbolic. And it deals in the most bizarre, arcane language. So much so that a great portion of it was actually censored by our sages, because it was just so symbolic, so metaphorical, that most people were confusing it to being literal, and it caused trouble. Maimonides, for example, had to deal with this, where in which one of the 13 principles of Judaism, as you know, God has no form or semblance of form. And yet, those who ascended are beginning to describe God's body, saying it's this size and this shape and this and that. And of course, this is completely symbolic, metaphorical language, just like later Zohar and Lurianic language is. But people who would read it didn't understand the metaphors and were taking this stuff literally. So when Maimonides is writing his 13 principles that God has no body, no semblance of body, go read the commentaries. And you'll see that the commentators say, yeah, not everybody agrees with that, Rambam. There are those who say God had a body. Well, it's because they take things symbolic and they make it literal. That's a big problem. So the original schools of ascent never lost. Maimonides, the big philosopher, we don't have a record of him practicing any of the prophetic techniques. But the nature of his wisdom and insight, philosophically based as it is, indicates to us that he must have had some connection to this. What that is historically or not, I cannot say. There are those very few who will read Maimonides and claim he was a Kabbalist. Now, again, you got to be careful how we use that word Kabbalist. Does it mean that Rambam Maimonides ascribed to the Zohar? Certainly not. But he does show insight and understanding of the ancient Ma'aseh Merkava traditions, which is the original and authentic, and I'll add, experiential Kabbalah. This is the most authentic Jewish Torah-based spirituality. It's never been lost, but has been replaced. Back in the 1200s, one of the great students of Maimonides after he passed away was Abulafia. Abulafia, a wild and a crazy guy, kind of like one of his Talmudim 800 years later, presently living in Allentown, PA. And he was using the combinations of the letters to create chants, expanding consciousness, experiencing power, and doing many great things. His teachings were very controversial. Why? Or let me rephrase, to whom? Well, it was at this exact same time that in response to Maimonides, there was almost a bait and switch going on. This is when in Provence and in Spain, there developed the metaphysical traditions, which are today called Kabbalah. I'm talking about the Bahir, the Zohar, and the like. More so the Zohar and the Zoharic literature. Now, here's the point. As you know, the Orthodox Catechism of today claims that the Zohar was written by Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave. Well, I used to believe that very emphatically, like everyone else in the Orthodox world. But I remember the likes of Gershom Scholem and all these other scholarly academics who at one time I roundly condemned, saying, that's not from Shimon Bar Yochai. That's what they called Neoplatonic metaphysics. Well, as a zealous rabbi as I was, I wanted to prove them wrong. So I went and looked up what this Neoplatonic metaphysics is supposed to be. And I found names like good old Plato and Plotinus, Pliny, and others. I said, all right, I want to read their books. Let me see for myself with my own eyes and understand with my own mind what this Neoplatonic metaphysics really is. I'll judge for myself. Dramatic pause here. Son of a gun. Sholem's right. Oh, I read them. I read them and I saw them. I said, son of a gun. When I was reading Timaeus, the Plato, I was scratching my head and said, I've seen this before. Now, you think Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave was reading Timaeus of Plato? I don't think so. But I'm going to tell you this, which is a fact. We can look throughout all Judaic literature, dating from Talmudic period, the Midrashim, and everything else related to the historical Shimon ben Yochai. And we will not find, in my opinion, anything similar in idea or concept to those beliefs that we find later in his name in the Zohar. I'm going to draw the conclusion that the Zohar, which was originally called the Midrash of Shimon Bar Yochai, is not the historical work of Shimon Bar Yochai, and very possibly it might not have had any historical connection to him whatsoever. Whether it does or it doesn't, I frankly could care less. Why? Oh, I still hold by the Zohar. Don't think I don't. I hold by the Zohar to be one of the greatest texts ever written. Not just Judaism, but anywhere. I hold it in the highest esteem, and of course I study the Zohar and I teach the Zohar. But I just look at its historicity differently than many of my peers who refuse to look at history. So, with that being said, the only real nafkamina, we would say, or difference, is where the Zohar fits into Jewish law as a halachic authority. You'll have the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Karo, who writes in his famous Beit Yosef commentary in Or Achaim, Kuf Mem Aleph, that pretty much the Zohar is higher than any authority in Judaism with the exception of the Talmud itself. Rabbi Moshe Isserles, the famous Rama, and his commentary there, Darkei Moshe, he disagrees. He says, no, the Zohar is just like any other opinion, and we weigh it accordingly. So, that's pretty much it. Rabbi Yosef Karo introduced a lot of Zoharic teachings into his Beit Yosef commentary and a lot of Zoharic opinions into modern Halakha. Our brothers, the Ashkenazim, held by different opinions. Whatever. Right? This is all from God, whatever. It doesn't matter whether or not the Zohar is written by Shimon Bar Yochai, Moshe de Leon, or a secret group of Kabbalists. Doesn't matter. Why? Because the teachings, when properly understood, are still sublime, profound, beautiful, and very, very valuable. But notice I emphasize those words, properly understood, because you have so many different commentaries on the Zohar. And they don't all agree. There's no one, in quote, like Rashi commentary, the authoritative commentary of Chumash. We don't have anything like that in the Zohar. People today can read the Yedid Nefesh commentary by my famous friend, the author there, Rabbi Yechiel Bar Lev. You could look at the Matok Medvash commentary. But I will tell you, there is one commentary in the Zohar, very popular today, that by tradition of my rabbis, we don't touch. And I'll emphasize, we don't touch with a 10-foot pole. And that is the commentary of the Sulam, Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag. My rabbis in Jerusalem did not accept him. They did not accept his commentary, his authority, did not accept his interpretations, did not accept his teachings at all. Now, this is a very important point, because many of the big Kabbalah schools today all follow the Ashlag Kabbalah. I don't have any Ashlag books in my house, in all due respect. Yes, I have his commentary to the Torah, to the Zohar, and it's very different from everything else. I'll read it, because as a scholar, I got to be aware of these things, but totally different school from ours. Don't touch it, don't go near it. It's not our way. It's not the way of the Sfaradim in Yerushalayim. That's the way I was taught. That's the way I receive. That's the way I teach. With that being said, the Zohar Kabbalah, as it developed in the 1200s, literally hit the Jewish world like a tidal wave. It literally washed away everything. It took the Abulafia school and almost made it disappear. When one of the big proponents of the coming Zoharic school, Rabbi Shlomo ben Ideret, the famous Rashba, who's a big Kabbalist, though people don't know that because Rashba is more famous for his Talmudic commentaries. Him, Ramban Nachmani, these were all pre-Zoharic Kabbalists. They knew all this stuff. They shut down Abulafia's experiential school, continuation of the old prophetic traditions, and they replaced it with this philosophy. When you come to study the Zohar, you get a profoundly mythological world view. And I use that word myth in a Jungian psychological way, meaning a way to look at the world. Not that it's a make-believe fairy tale or anything of the kind. It's what you believe, where you think is where you're at. And it created a construct of a reality which has inspired Jewish individuals for centuries, making them more God-centered, God-fearing, or righteous than holy human beings. Hey, can't disagree, fight with that. So therefore, 2 thumbs up for me for the Zohar. Doesn't matter what its history is. It serves its purpose. But the, again, limitation of the Zohar, the limitation of the Zohar tradition, which includes a lot of the Lurianic tradition, the Ari'zal, which is what we teach here, is that most people only look at what we call the pshat, the sod, the surface level of it. Again, a critique against many of my peers. They read the Kabbalistic literature and they think they understand it by taking it literally. And I remember learning with my teacher, Rebbe Meir Levi, Alav Shalom, who taught me how absolutely ridiculous that was. And remember, I came out of Bethel. I was studying with Rav Darzi, Rav Hadaya, even when Rav Kaduri was there. Rav Kaduri took me through the Maftech Shlomo, page by page. You know what Maftech Shlomo is? That's the original Keys of Solomon. Yeah, I got one of the original Bakal versions. And he showed me the stuff. So I know this stuff to this very day from I would say the horse's mouth. I'm not going to call a rabbi that. From the authority. How many of my peers could say that? So let me tell you what I learned from Rabbi Meir. Not only did I learn what the books say, I learned what they mean. I learned how to read between the words. I learned that what the Baal Shem Tov taught later was so radically true. All of the Lurianic system, his beautiful interpretation of the Zohar, is psychologically based. When we talk about the worlds of Adam Kadmon and Atzilut Birya Yitzira Asiya, we talk about the Partsufim of Arich, Atik, Abba, Ima, Zanok. All of these are psychological metaphors for states and levels of human consciousness and our interactions with realms within us. We talk about levels of soul, Nefesh Ruach, Neshama, Hayahida. We're talking about personality orientations, levels of consciousness. Sound familiar? It's very similar. It's identical to the original prophetic teachings. I remember years and years ago, I approached Rav Darzi when he was the Menahel, the leader, the manager at the Diskin Orphanage in Mahdi Yehuda. I said to him, I was an arrogant young man, and I said, I want to study Ma'aseh Merkava. I said, study the Kitvei Ari. Well, years and years went by, and I studied the Kitvei Ari. And I said, where's the Ma'aseh Merkava? He says, it's in there. I didn't see it. Why? Because I was looking at the surface. It took me years to understand what he meant. By then, he had passed away. What he meant was very simple. When you connect and understand the relationship of the schools, you go into the experiential. You'll recognize that the Lurianic teachings, like the Baal Shem Tov taught, speaks to the internal reality of man, humanity, male, female. And that is the prophetic Ma'aseh Merkava path. That is the experiential way. What the Ben Ish Hai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, and others would call the secrets of Kabbalah. Well, that's the big Havdalah, if you will, difference. When I teach here at our KosherTorah school, and what the big peers out there teach. Everybody has all their philosophy, and they tell you you don't need to meditate. You don't need to do this work. Just believe what they teach you. Just listen to this and that, and you're oohing and eyeing, and you are entertained. Kabbalah is not entertainment. Kabbalah is not philosophy. I was about to try to say metaphysical philosophy. You know what? It's not that. And if you don't understand the pinimiyut, inner reality of it, the psychology of it, well, then you're not really getting the real thing. So if you're pursuing the philosophy of Kabbalah, like most of my peers are, well, good for you. You can sit and read the Otzrot Hayim, and you can read it 10 times over, and you'll think you'll understand it. Go take my courses on Otzrot Hayim just once. You'll see the difference. I teach people like my Rebbe Meir taught me, Ech lahavinam, how to understand them. I will teach you the psychology of it. I will teach you the archetypes of it, how it becomes transpersonal, how it becomes experiential, so that you can follow the old prophetic path. Why? So that you can fulfill a simple biblical commandment called Devikut, bonding with God. Maimonides, remember good old Maimonides, Mr. Philosopher? He opens up his code of law, the famous Mishnah Torah, with the laws of the foundations of Torah. And the first 4 chapters, he's dealing with these super deep metaphysical topics, talking about the angels, the consciousness and sentience of planets and life forms and the like. And this is really deep stuff, which today we would call Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereshit. Why does he open up his code of law by discussing these things? Well, he says so very clearly himself. He says, because by contemplating these things, learning and experiencing them for yourself with your own experience, brings you to experience and thus fulfill two foundational commandments of the law of the Torah, which is to love God and to be in awe of God. I don't like that word fear of God. Yirat Shamayim. Ahavat Hashem and Yirat Shamayim. That's what this stuff does. When you experience, you see with your own eyes. When you study the philosophy, you study the Otzot. I've known people who studied Otzot Hayim. I know they've gone through the Etz Hayim. They read the Kavanot, and they're saying up, down, all around, and they make no connection, no contact. And it goes in one ear and out the other. It's almost like wasting their time. But when you understand, for example, the Kavanot system of the Ariel, and you recognize that the movement of what we will call Shefa, the energy, the Ein Sof, through the vessels of the Sefirot and the worlds, how does it get through there? That's what Kavanot come in. Remember Eliyahu in the rain? Eliyahu made it happen. So when you're doing Kavanot, you're making it happen. We're running out of time, and I'm going to digress, maybe go over a couple minutes. I'll share with you a funny story. When I first learned the Kavanot of the Kaddish prayer, Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Mirabah, I outlined it to my Rebbe Meir from the Shara Kavanot, wrote a big diagram, and I made it all look, this energy comes from here, it goes there, does this, does that. And he looked and said, very good. And I said to him, I'm ready now to do it, right? Poor Rebbe Meir. God rest his soul. He suffered from asthma. And when I said those words to him, yeah, I'm ready, he had a coughing fit. I thought he was going to die. Reminded me of something like what Luke Skywalker was telling Yoda. And I said, what's going on? He says, ready? You're not ready for anything yet. You don't understand anything. And again, it took me years before I finally dawned on me what Rebbe Meir was teaching me. Until it could arise up from within, you're never going to get what's without. That's why our KosherTorah school is different. Because I've had these experiences. Unlike many of my peers who, again, they read books, they teach you what the books say, and they tell you just follow what the books say. Well, if that's all that you're interested in, following what the books say, good for you. God bless, be happy. All right? I'm not an evangelist. I'm not an evangelic. I'm not a missionary. I'm not out there to bring the whole world to our KosherTorah school. Our KosherTorah school is here for those people who are meant for it, who are looking for this. That's why I'm on the internet. That's why we're out in the public, because I know there are people all around the world, one here, one there, and that's how we connect. And I hope and pray that by going public through here on Facebook and YouTube and the like, we're here to find you. And if you're here, I'm here. And I hope that we'll make these connections. And I hope that we'll be able to work together to learn the experiential, original, authentic ways of the biblical prophets, called by different names throughout the centuries: Ma'aseh Merkava, Kabbalah Nevu'it, Prophetic Kabbalah, Biblical Commandment of Divikut. This is what it's all about. This is all about you, to get you, to make you aware that you, I, we are part of a greater whole. Not just to acknowledge it as a philosophical concept, but to experience it personally, to develop your psychic inner ability, expand consciousness, and to connect. And when we do this, we will accomplish one of the greatest and most ancient biblical prophecies. Book of Joel, Spirit of God coming upon us. This is the Torah of the Mashiach. This is what we need to do. So for all of my religious friends out there who want to bring Messiah, sitting and stomping your feet saying, we want Mashiach now, is going to do a hill of beans. But doing this will. The Baal Shem Tov himself had a dream, a very famous dream, where in which goes up in an Aliyah ascent, meets Mashiach, and he says, hey, when are you coming already? He goes, when people are able to make Aliyah ascents, just like you do. Right? Now, how many people are making these Aliyah ascents? Not those people who claim that they're following the Baal Shem Tov. No one's making them. Most of Hasidism today is just philosophy. Very rare individuals are practicing Aliyot. Well, here we are. This is why we're here. This is why I'm here. And I hope this is why you're here too. So for those of you who want to practice Aliyot, ascent, become a student of our KosherTorah school. Support us. I can support you. Let's work together. My books are available to you. My courses are available to you. Money, never let money get in the way. Make money happen. Just like Aliyah materialized the rain, materialized the funds. Let's make it happen. Let's work together. Let's make a difference in our world. We got enough stinky problems in this planet of ours. Let's heal things. Let's work together. Can we do that? Yes, we can. Not just by talking about it. Let's do something together. This is the month of Elul. This is a time of recalibration for Rosh Hashanah. Let's get our acts together. I invite you to come work with me in our KosherTorah school. Our doors are always open for everyone who wants to come and learn. I don't care who you are, what you are. You're welcome. Let's learn together. I'm Ariel Tzadok from the KosherTorah school. Here welcoming you to join us. God bless. We'll talk to you all soon. See you in our next class. Shalom.